Hello and welcome to another episode of the Disruptive Author. This morning I'm talking to Kirsty Fields from Social Ocean. She's the creative director there, and we've already been chatting a little bit and just thought we better stop the chat in the background and actually start recording something so that people can benefit from this amazing conversation that I'm having. So Kirsty has a marketing agency. She does social media workshops. She does design like graphics, logos, and websites, and she puts business events together for people. And just at top of mind for me at the moment is you've started doing the Ladies Who Long Lunch, which is just a delightful concept, not just a delightful name, but a delightful concept, and something that has been very popular, hasn't it? You've only done a couple, or you've done one and you're about to do a second one.
Yeah. We had our first inaugural event, timed well for International Women's Day, which was lovely. But our second one's actually on this week, and
awesome.
We both sellouts. So
yes,
we're really excited about that. But yeah, the concept about a long lunch, I think it's all in the name. We sit around for a few hours, enjoying good food, good company, good wine, and in lovely locations. And we move those locations around, Brisbane and Moreton Bay area at this point in time.
Yeah.
We've already.
So that's how you can incorporate more people and.
Yeah, because we've got so I collaborate with my friend Jo Stevens for the Ladies Who Long Lunch events.
It's equally delightful. Yes,
absolutely. We're having so much fun doing it. But we've got quite broad networks that locally. So we'd love to see one on the south side of Brisbane. We don't have one in the works for that just yet, but we'd love to do that next year, hopefully. But at the moment, we're flitting between Brisbane and Moreton Bay with our events, which is helpful because obviously, you easily fill up your diary and you can't make every single one of them, but it'd be lovely to think that we might have our dates saved on people's diaries and get them there for all of them for a little bit of self-care and time out. So it's basically a business women events to help people connect and make friends, but very much a social format. So we're kind of crossing over to give ladies some time out and some self-care away from business. I think we choose to attend or leave our office for things that are educational and will lift our business.
Yeah.
But in reality,
you can justify it then.
But in reality, we're not necessarily going out to have fun. So if we can provide both of those things in the one space, then there's no excuse not to be there,
Sounds great. And it's long enough that people actually get a chance to really connect with some people, and instead of dashing in, dashing out, great to see you, see you later sort of thing, got to get back to work.
Well, our whole concept or level of encouragement is about setting you out of office before you leave to maybe change your outfit or, put some heels on. You don't have to do those things, but give yourself some time, put the out of office on and leave and start your weekend. So all our events are actually on a Friday lunchtime.
I love Friday afternoons. Get the Friday afternoon feels.
Yes, exactly. And so if you can set that out of office on Thursday, have some additional time, relaxation time in the morning before you head out to us, then there's an entire day, kind of each quarter at a very, very bare minimum. So we're definitely encouraging people in busy times to take time out away from a hectic schedule, but also the confines of what your office space is or your storefront.
Yeah, totally. So that's just one part of what you do, and obviously a part that you're quite passionate about. I do notice, like Disruptive Publishing, you have like a range of done for you and done with you products, which we just started touching on before I started recording. But I'd love to know more about that. So it's obviously a broad range of what you're offering. How did you come to be actually doing this work? How did you land yourself here?
Well, I describe myself as an accidental business owner.
Okay.
I, like a lot of people, I was made redundant. I use the word redundant, not the exact description of what happened, but best description that people understand. Back at the very beginning of 2017, and I was probably a couple of weeks, I was kind of struggling with the fact that, like, the shock of what had happened. It was very unexpected. Not sure what I was going to do next. I was thinking about, oh my gosh, I've got to put a resume together. I hadn't had a resume for like 20 years.
Yep. What's that?
I'm working in, actually have a background in sports administration and sports marketing. And before that, I've worked in libraries for both council and education department. But all through my job experiences, I kind of have a common thread of events. Even working in libraries, I was helping out art gallery openings and that type of thing. Always. Okay. So there's always this events happening for me. And when I got into sports administration, that actually it was amplified, running many events week to week throughout the sports season. But the role that I was made redundant from was from a marketing manager's role, which had incorporated a lot of social media. And that was at the time where we were really transitioning from social media being, just fun, to Facebook particularly introducing business elements to the capabilities within the platform. And so within that time, I really started using social media a lot to communicate with younger audience and younger audience, parents of that audience. So right before being made redundant, unforeseen circumstances, I really struggled with like a loss of my identity of being made redundant.
I bet.
Within a very short time frame, I had a couple of friends contact me saying, look, I know that you're not very busy at the moment, and could you perhaps help us with some things?
So I was doing they saw the opportunity.
Kirsty, you're not very busy right now, but I need your help. So I was doing some graphic design for a friend, and then another friend had lost their events coordinator for their conference program. Okay. And so that was that actual organization that needed me to invoice them for my time. So that I wasn't going to be doing it for free. They didn't want me to do it for free, but I needed to invoice them. And so 5 minutes later, I was a business owner without intent. It just happened. And so I've woken up one day going, I need a business name. And what am I going to do when I'm not doing their events? Is this a job? What is it? So that's how I've come to start to run my business. But apart from helping them with events, I still had a fair amount of time on my hands. And so I was really exploring what it was that I knew about marketing that I could do as a done for you service.
And actually sell.
What does
package?
What does it look like? What am I going to do in this business? And I have really spent a lot of time trying to create processes for myself to make my life easier. And so social media training was something that I identified from the very beginning. So always Social Ocean has had this training element, and I try to impart my processes to other people to help them do things quickly, but do them well, and understand the social media platforms to help them reach a broader audience without spending money on digital advertising. So I have that's
the part I want to hone in on today. So you've got developed an organic knowledge around that and package.
I grew up in a low socioeconomic area, just generally speaking. I have a family with a lot of siblings. My parents did well to stretch their dollar, and so I have that mentality, and my business mentors would tell you that it's an annoying thing that I have, that I want to work on a low budget always, but it's not that I want to work on a low budget, it's that I can work with a low budget, and I like to stretch my buck. And so I don't believe in paying multinationals my hard-earned dollars to promote me when I can promote myself. And that's what I'd like other people to learn that they can do for themselves within that social media space specifically. But also what areas of social media will work for an individual business will look different. Where where you could or should do that is going to be different based on if you've got a product or if you're a service, or, you know, are you an electrician or are you an author, you know, as an example. So these finite details are very different for each person. And I think that that's probably something that I like to do when, you know, working with people. I like to identify what's different about that person. And
so you like to customize.
Yeah. What
something we talked about earlier. Yeah.
Yeah. Your opportunities, even as an author, to perhaps one of your other author clients that you work with is going to be different from my perspective.
And you have to be clear about that. That's a message I've been trying to get across very strongly of late. Be clear about your specific message and your specific audience. And that you've got to be clear about that. Yeah.
But even further from being clear, but understanding actually what your I guess uniqueness is. So I think if people can be clear and communicate well, but it's actually diving deep and understanding the uniqueness about them from another person's perspective, because we know our story, or you know your story, but actually someone else's perspective about your story is going to be different to even what your perspective about yourself is, if that makes sense.
Very interesting. Yes, totally. All right. So tell us, who do you like to work with most?
My clients might think I'm favouring someone over another, but we've got broad audiences. We've probably got 3 different key audiences for our clientele. Okay. So I work with micro businesses a lot. So those people are looking for, you know, training workshops because they perhaps have got a lower budget, and that generally occurs when they're in that launch phase, like their first and second
startup.
That real startup phase of figuring out, just like what I did, what am I going to do in this business, or what am I going to sell? What are my strengths and weaknesses and interests and passions?
How can I use my expertise and my experience and really make something?
Yeah, but also how does that translate into dollars? Because that's an interesting learning path. And so I always find that in working with people like that is interesting to me. But we also work with a lot of like industry bodies or organizations, and I've got quite a few housing and educational organizations, very different from each other, but I think that organizational bodies are interesting and come with a lot of things that are in common. You know, they work with a lot of volunteers, for example. So like I have a strong connection with volunteerism, and I really appreciate the time of a volunteer and what they bring to the mix. So that's another interesting group of people that we work with. And then I guess we've got a different type of audience that might be needing graphic design and website service. That's very broad and kind of covers everything. But we don't work with everybody,
but you do have something to offer for anyone that's trying to put a message out there, pretty much.
And I guess when Social Ocean has grown over the last 5 years into being like a full-fledged marketing agency now. So we do have services that's probably suitable for everybody, but not every service is for everybody.
Yes, totally. So let's just hone in on the micro businesses in particular, because many of my authors will fall into that category. And so let's talk about how you can help them, or what you do currently to help that demographic.
I've worked with a few authors in my time, actually, and from helping them redesign websites to accommodate, their book or books as a key focus on their website. So I've done a lot of website stuff with authors, and from even I'm actually working with an author right now, redesigning a very old website. That's probably the best description. Using an old
is old now after 3 years. Seriously.
It's very easy. This is probably a bit older than that. Okay. So helping also bring in the other marketing elements that perhaps authors don't necessarily think of when they're writing a book. I think a lot of people have a yearning to write a book on share a story or share education and passion projects, but they don't necessarily come at writing that book as with a business perspective. And so a book, this is my opinion, so another person in marketing might differ, but I believe that each individual book has its own branding and has its own entity that can stand out next to another book that same author might write. So that brings interesting conversation for me, and it would be like selling very completely different services or very different products, but each one needs to stand out on its own. And so when I come to talk to an author about who's a multi-book author, we sometimes struggle coming to a great perspective which we both match, because we need to identify the priorities around this individual book at that time. What might be some of the struggles? What might be? What I mean by that is if so, for example, I mean, I'm not an author, but if I wrote a book about my best tips on social media versus how to plan events, my two audiences are going to be very different. For me, I already have a business, so I could bring in, and I would bring in, business branding to both of those books before I started writing it. Because I would be thinking about what can my social media book do for me in a space to help promote the things that I am doing in social media, because this makes sense because I have social media services. When I want to write a book about events,
you're using it as a tool.
So I'm using books as a tool, and I love the term authorpreneur because this is what an authorpreneur is doing. They're writing,
and that's what authors have to be now. You can't just be an author. You have to think like a business person.
Well, my perspective on that is if you've written your memoirs because you just needed to write them, you may
still got to sell it. It's not going to sell itself. If you want to share a story, you still have to think like someone, or get someone to do some marketing for you. You still have to present it somewhere.
I guess my perspective there is that there are many people who will write not to sell, but because they actually had to create that book, and they might print one book in their life, and it's because they wanted to give it to their child or, something like that.
There are some very
minute number of authors would do that. I would hope.
Especially given that there is a significant investment of time and money to actually go through that process.
And so if I'm talking to the majority of people who should be writing to sell, I think that there's a lot of people helping authors in this space, with done for you services, just like we have done for you services. But I think that there's less energy put into that beginning phase before the writing occurs. And I'm going to write for tools to sell. And if I don't if I don't work through those steps in the right order, by the time my print edition is ready to arrive, I won't have even sold a book. Now, how, the thought process around how would I have sold a book if I didn't have the print book? Well, for me in the author space, there should be pre-sales happening before the print book arrived and before you opened a box. So there's a lot of things to work through, and I'm not a specialist in this space like you are, Deb, but the difference, or it's not the difference, the commonality between what I would do with anyone in marketing versus working with an author in marketing is we still identify where are our opportunities, what's the order of events that we need to do things in order to make money, and how to make more money. Because we can make money, but we could always make more money.
Yes. And the good thing about books is they don't die, especially with the sort of books that and the sort of authors that I work with, they're writing nonfiction books, and their information will be relevant eternally, basically. So yes, there is no end point. So yes, thinking long term, thinking bigger picture, thinking yes, just yes to what you're saying.
Yeah, well, I think I've been asked, would you like to write a book? I'm working in a space. So, for example, I'd never write a social media book. By the time it went to print, it would be out of date.
Yeah, that is one that would be out of date. But yes, but there are some basics in marketing that you could be writing about.
Right. So I would need to identify. So just say, I'd love to write a book about social media. Just by talking through that process with someone, like an expert like you did, I would surely be able to identify that's not what I should be writing about, because I'm not going to sell it in 12 months' time by the time I finish the writing, editing, printing, distribution, launch processes, right? Because literally within 12 months, social media has changed enough. So I would need to identify what it is I need to be writing about to make money.
What you want to do
really
with
want to
it.
make money.
Yeah, what do you want to do with it? How do you want it to impact, and how do you want it to grow? It's got to be to grow your business or grow, where you are in your life. It's exactly. So you just got to be thinking of that all the time.
Yeah.
Ebooks though, you could do ebooks as lead magnets.
That's right.
So, and they don't have to be long, but they can be short, catchy. They can grab people here and now. And then you've got an audience. So as things change, you do another ebook in 6 months' time. Here's the latest. And you've already got an audience to sell to.
So one of my tips for entrepreneurs is, because the process is generally lengthy, the ebook idea actually works for an entrepreneur for the interim of even the idea of having the chapter 1 as an ebook selling online, whilst you then write chapters 2 to 10, is something that's doable and a worthy idea as well. So there's lots of different opportunities and concepts around, the entrepreneurship. Is that a word?
Let's adopt it. Let's just say it is entrepreneurship. I like it. That's very good.
I think
it's a way to approach writing, isn't it?
Yeah. So I would approach that process for myself like I would have that conversation with another person. I want to have branding. Even if an author doesn't have branding before, by the time that book arrives and is ready to be on pre-sale, that author needs to be branded and have branding elements. The cover of that book, if it's the one-off, if it's the one book, there's only one book in you,
which is most unusual. Usually, once people have done one, they realise there's more.
They can do more. Okay. Well, in that case, as I don't know if I've worked with many authors, I have worked with authors with many books, but generally I haven't worked with anyone that's got multiple books. I keep coming back to one of my clients who's written prolifically. She's got so many books, but most of the people I've worked with have only had the one to date. And I think it's because they probably didn't expect the time required to put into a really decent size. We're talking about big books here. But they're branded, they're selling that book. They're selling that book years later. They're still selling that book. They've created processes to incorporate that book into things that they do, where they go, who they speak to, who they want to continue attract in their businesses. And so they're really changing from an author's mindset to a business mindset.
Yep, to that entrepreneurial thinking.
Into entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
So I think there's much to be said about engaging an author coach like you, Deb, because otherwise we go from this yearning of writing and we might start writing without guidance. But then we've written.
Hello. I heard that.
We've written a book that is on a typewriter. It's kind of that idea of then now what do I do with my 1,000 leaves? Where do I go? Because we didn't have that guidance in the first place. And I think that
if you've got the direction, and I think actually writing a book and marketing are probably very much the same. If you know where you want to go, you can figure out the content, you can figure out the path, and the book can be one path, but there's lots of things to consider within that one path.
I think that's probably where, I mean, self-publishing coaches come in, is digesting the other elements past that book. Do you have a keynote? Do you have a short presentation? If you've got a webinar, have you got traffic, like downloadable ebooks? What other things are happening? Have you got a YouTube channel, or you're doing podcasts around this topic? There's so many things that someone can help with guidance. Just
how can you repurpose, as Trish would say, and leverage what you've already got in your book?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so from a marketing concept, when we digest your content and content creation, if you've got a substantial piece of content, of which a book is very much a substantial piece of content, totally. we digest that the exact same way that we digest a blog, or a podcast interview, or a YouTube video. They're what I would call a more substantial content, and they get repurposed not once, not twice, not into just 8 things, but into 20 things, and they get edited for purpose. So they might churn out looking like a motivational quote, perhaps.
Yes.
Or they might turn into, something that's still substantial but smaller, like an ebook. And so that's no different about me working with someone who's got the whole book versus someone who's just writing blogs, for example, for business education. That idea and the marketing requirements for that are aligned, very much aligned.
So let me ask you, so you've already given us a couple of tips, and what I was hoping to get from you today was 3 tips that you would give to an author who wants to market themselves in their books. So one that you've already mentioned, you said you would share with authors, was about having a big launch. Did we talk about that before, or did we talk about that?
We talked about that before. With my events experience, I want to turn everything into an event, and events bring fun and frivolity. But
are you an extrovert?
I honestly think that I'm an omnivert.
Okay,
I'm very comfortable being up the front and being, having the lights on me. I'm very comfortable in that space.
Yeah.
But I've realised, and maybe it's something with age, that I still like time on my own, to recharge, just like an introvert does. But I re-energize by being around other people. So I differ from an introvert in that capacity, where I do need the company of others.
Yeah.
But yes, an event is going to bring a lot more outcomes than just book sales.
Yes.
But the idea of having a book launch allows you to focus a lot of marketing for what seems to be one outcome of having a social gathering. But when you put an event plan into place, that's not a 1 week, 2 week concept. That's a 3-month marketing campaign all on its own. And it's no different to what I'm actually doing with Ladies Who Log Lunches this week. I'm working on another community open day in a couple of months. And we've just begun our 3-month planning phase for that community event. And so it allows you to digest the elements of your book, the marketing elements of your book, the repurposing abilities along the way as well. And this really allows you to practice that, which you would need to be doing long term to get to use the age of your book over a period of years, or until you write your next one, of course. But it actually allows you to use other people as your marketing launch pad as well. So that might look like, who wrote your foreword? Who are the people that are writing testimonials about your book for you? Have you got these things already done in place? And if you don't, they need to be inserted into the next book and on the cover of the next book. But they become marketing elements. They attract people by nature. People love a good referral. But also people are attracted to other people, even if they are introverted and they feel like they don't want to go outside. They'll be attracted by something that they're passionate and interested in.
They'll live vicariously through someone like yourself that's out there doing this and doing that. And yes.
Yeah, exactly. But I hope that even introverted people would understand the importance of bringing people together and celebrate a book in a book phase, a book launch phase, a book launch event, a book launch marketing campaign. All of these things anyone can do. You don't need to be extroverted to do that. But I would strongly encourage those who are introverted in your audience to consider what this looks like for you, and you can get assistance from someone who might feel a bit more comfortable in this space to help you with that.
I would actually recommend that, because many authors are actually introverted.
Yeah.
So maybe not those that are more entrepreneurial, but many are introverted.
I think by nature, staying inside, and introverted people will still be doing things online. The last 2 years has shown that anyone can do that.
Yes.
But for an introverted person, as I understand it, because I'm not an introverted person, even turning up online is hard. So having an event is going to help create focus for the necessity around selling that book. And, for me, I would say, one big event, but also I would say, if you don't have a local library that has, local author highlights, spotlights, opportunities and evenings to bring authors together, it doesn't have to be at a library. It can be at your local pub. It could be at your local pub, because maybe you're living in a rural area and that's the only place where people gather.
It's the community hall. Yes.
The community hall, the CWA hall.
Yeah.
Putting on a morning tea. It doesn't have to be extravagant with fireworks and lights. It could simply be, a breakfast that allows you to engage with your audience on a different level. And this is the thing about events marketing. There's a lot of elements that come into play there that are more than, having to make ourselves turn up to an event. It actually gives the people in the room personal connection to you as an author.
Yeah.
There is longevity in the marketing from that event, and the elements, like having a photographer, for example, at that event, having people record it, having the people who wrote your foreword present and introduce you. I've one of my authors' launch evenings included a friend who had written a poem about the author. And that lady stood up and read the poem out at that launch evening. Of course, you've got book signings and the sales element, photos with you and your guests. These become, this is how you use other people at a launch event to help you with your marketing. It might not help with an elderly population so much, but it certainly will work with a younger demographic who are all across social media. And so this is
what I call your law of collaboration. I do think it's a universal law, and the more people you involve in what you're doing, so for example, when we do our compilation books, the more people that that law of collaboration comes into play, because you're sharing networks and that you're just building energy around a much broader number of people who are impacted or touched in some way by what's happening.
And as you can imagine, Deb, how many people would you have on average in a collaborative book?
20 to 25. Yeah.
So imagine 20 people marketing separately one book. That's 20 times the impact. Now, that could also mean 20 different launch events. Because
that's right. The opportunity is there.
Yeah, each one of those authors has a separate opportunity, separate to a major collaborative launch event. For me, the collaboration books having a launch event, I still think is very important to be a single event, but I understand through distance that's very difficult to accommodate.
Yeah.
Even though, as we return to travel a bit more right now, it's still difficult. You might have collaborative authors in different countries. So that's just never going to happen for you.
And that's happening a lot more now because we can.
Yeah. But, for me, that would come back to the planning out of that collaborative book, Deb. Okay, well, let's have a couple of authors from the one country or the one geographic location so that they could, in fact, have a little minor launch event together and do the exact same concept. But here we've got, New Zealand launch here, we've got Queensland launch here, we've got, Singapore launch here. So, there's ways even working through a collaborative author search that will affect marketing outcomes too, or improve them. So, everything that we do in the business sense comes back to marketing in my perspective. That planning always results in marketing activities as a result.
Yes. So I asked you about giving us 3 tips. So launch was one. You mentioned another one earlier as well in our conversation. Okay. What other 2 points would you say? What other 2 things would you suggest an author look at or be aware of around marketing?
One of the key things does go back to our conversation earlier about repurposing content. You actually want to create a content strategy based on your book and those elements so that they can be brought into either a broader marketing plan or a content plan. So it can be inserted in with your other business or product information, because we don't just want to do a hard sell. And I think you've mentioned that, authors are often introverted. This plays into their wheelhouse a little bit more. Introverted people aren't hard selling, hard salesy styled people. And in fact, what I would say is they undersell. And so creating a content plan around the book and how it can be discussed and brought into communication points is really important, because it allows you to be selling a book without being or feeling salesy.
Yeah.
And that aligns with me. I really feel a little bit icky by saying, hey, buy my book. Here's the link. $29.99. I don't like just being outright like that. There's a place for it. And it needs to be included, but basically it needs to be included for the people who hate to be salesy. They're just got to put it in there so that it's out there. But creating a content plan is very wise, and editing the format of your content for the platforms where you show up online, and making sure, and I guess rolls into my third tip would be is to review and incorporate branding into this space where possible, and create a location for that book online that allows it to have a focus. If that's one page on a website, then it's one page on a website. If you don't have a website, I would strongly advise you to do so. You don't need to sell through your own website if you don't have the budget to set up e-commerce situation for your website, because that just tips people over into a different budget situation. But if you're a multi-purpose, if you're a multi-book author, then you really need to consider e-commerce capabilities so that you're not paying commissions to other, Amazon bookstores.
Yes.
And because, that is a reality about paying commissions to other people when
I'm further than the commissions even is the control of your list. So when someone buys from Amazon, you don't have the opportunity to reach out to them after they've bought from you and say, hey, what did you think of the book? Would you give me a testimonial? Is there something I can do for you? And build a relationship with that person. There's no opportunity. But when someone buys from your website, then you have their contact details. You can engage with them with their permission, of course. You can engage a longer conversation with them. And as you develop it, write more books, develop your business, whatever it is, you just may be able to help that person in some way.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And I think that brings an interesting concept into making sure you've got it covered in your marketing. is about building a list.
There you go. One of my questions for you was list building versus social media. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, for me, this is not a versus. It's not social media versus
yes.
List building. Social media is your traffic light system.
Nice.
Social media is designed from a business perspective to send your client to the space where they need to arrive for you to convert them, and either warm them up from there if they haven't been warmed up from following your social media for a while, and then converting them if they're already a hot lead and they're just finally arriving where they need to be because they've remembered they need to buy your book this week instead of been thinking about it for a little while as they've got to know you, they're ready to go. But people will subscribe, sign up for that ebook, just add themselves to your newsletter system through that website. And here's the importance of that website coming into play here. You can't do this if you're relying on another shop to sell your wares in any situation. But once you're building that list, you can then warm them up. So you end up with two different lists. The hot ones that are already converted and made a sale, great. What will you do with them? Do you just love and let them go? Do you
such a sad loss of opportunity? Yeah.
Do you maintain them because you know that next book is coming? Do you engage them in a different way? Do you make them feel important in a different way?
If they've written a business book or they've used their memoir to move into a coaching space, then the book is not the end product. The book is a means to an end. So that is something to consider as well.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so I think from my perspective, if you, well, I mean, I'm repeating myself here, but if you haven't worked out your plan for selling, you'll end up losing future sales or more sales based on how much of a tool that actual book or resource is. But the other thing is if they're still a cold lead, but they have attached themselves to something that you're doing, newsletter lists or whatever, from there, it's your task to convert. And this is where you're feeding directly into that inbox. With social media, you're not feeding necessarily directly into their inbox without a lot of systems in place. So, circling back around social media versus list building, it's not a versus. Social media will help you build your list. There's no doubt about it.
That's how I would look at it. Absolutely.
Yeah, but there's a lot of stuff that goes into play with a lead list to help you build it and then make future sales, more sales,
nurture,
repeat sales. Yeah. And nurturing, not spamming. There's a fine line.
Yes, you fine line. And that too comes down to sometimes, talking before about the introvert that undersells. Maybe, and you mentioned this earlier too, about the objectivity, how you're seen, not just how you see your story, how other people see your story. Probably good to get some feedback from other people on where that line is that you're talking about between spamming and educating or warming, nurturing.
I mean, you spend a lot of time writing your book. You're going to spend a lot of time marketing it.
You would think so, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
You would think so, but I got to tell you, not actually the case. And why is that? So, which may be another conversation for another day. But why do authors put so much time and sometimes a lot of money as well into writing a book and then do not follow up with marketing when and where they can? Will we leave the listeners with that question and maybe revisit that on another day? Because that is something that happens.
I think, Deb, once I get started talking about something in marketing, my juices start flowing. I can go off on tangents. This is part of a creative process, I suppose. But maybe that's definitely a conversation for a different day. But I mean, I'd love to do that on a different day with you. There's no doubt about that. But I think that if I mean, how, you've authored so many things, Deb. What's the average time that you would spend on?
Oh, a lot. Like, I honestly couldn't add up, because as you say, everything's a creative process. So you're working on this, and then you're working on that, and then you're working on this. You come back to that, and then you do this. So, and then you might go, oh, well, I've put all of that content together over there, so I'll pull it together here into a book or an ebook. So it's an ongoing thing. It's about momentum, I think.
Yeah. Because I think I haven't thought about it. It would be great to figure out what the percentage is of time to writing to time to plan marketing beforehand to time to sale afterward. Like, it'd be great to figure out what the balancing statistic is for how much time you're going to put into it based on how much time it took to write.
But let's look at this, though. How much less time are you going to put in if you do your planning first?
Oh, well, I mean, I don't
so
know.
Maybe not less time, but less wasted time.
Yes, I was just going to say, I don't know what the exact time is, but you'll certainly save loads. Like, you'll save loads of energy and time, but also, for me, as being a creative person, I can put a lot of time and energy into things that are absolutely have no service to me, just because I love doing them.
Just because it's fun, yes, I can relate.
I really don't want to do the things that I don't want to do, just like everybody else.
The boring business stuff that just is part of business. Yeah.
Invoicing.
Yeah.
But like, honestly, if you think about what will serve you, and you identify what that will be, and you focus on the hard part first, and you get to the fun later, well, then you get to have fun and be more creative, and
work
add
first
on
and party later.
The icing on the cake.
Yeah.
And make that your reward, and get through the hard yards first of all. But if you don't put any planning into your marketing, well, then you're just turning up online and doing motivational quotes every day, and that serves no purpose to anyone, and it doesn't communicate your message, your passion, or your education possibilities either.
All right, so I think we've covered quite a bit in this interview, so I'm just going to finish with the question: how can our audience work with you if they want to explore further, put a plan in place at the beginning of their writing? It doesn't matter. I want to encourage authors. It's never too late to start marketing. Especially if you have a non-fiction book or a memoir, that's not going to change over time. Start now, wherever you're at. So how can people actually work with you?
Look, just generally, I try to book people in for a 30-minute consult, just to see if I can, create that connection and identify that we're the right person for each other, because there are lots of people in marketing and personalities clash. And I think that you need to find the person that you feel comfortable with to help you in this space, and who's got your back.
You're probably right about that.
I think that's really important. But from there, we can do planning sessions, consults. You could book into a social media workshop if you knew you should be on a platform you're not confident in how to use. There's lots of different ways that we can work with people, but yeah, I definitely encourage them to reach out either through social media. We're very active on social media, as you can imagine. You can shoot us a DM wherever you are, that doesn't matter, or head over to socialocean.com.au and look at the services that we've got there and see, maybe where you've got a gap that you might need some help with, and read a little bit more about them. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time today. I've thoroughly enjoyed talking to you. I think I could, actually, if we were doing one of those long lunches, I'd probably be talking to you all afternoon. But that's marketing, and I just find marketing fascinating. It's all about relationship building for me, and specifically with the people that you want to connect with. So it's always fun, and always fun getting creative about how you're going to do that, how you're going to catch people's attention and engage them and light them up, I guess.
I'm 100% in agreement with that. I think it's what gets me out of bed every day. I do something different every day, and that's really what I love about it. Yeah, it's great.
All right, my love, let's wind things up here, and look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thanks, Deb. Appreciate the opportunity.